Hello, everybody, and welcome to Winning the Writing Game, live today from the UK, the Republic of Ireland, and Canada. Welcome also to our viewers from all over the world, from Italy, South America, Nova Scotia, and closer to home. It feels like a fitting international coming together today for our 1 hour insight into the creative mind of one of the world's biggest selling thriller writers, the amazing Linwood Barclay, whose new book, Find You First, we are here to help celebrate today. I'll be handing over in a moment to my best-selling colleague, Sam Blake, who's going to quiz Linwood. And remember that we welcome your comments and questions live throughout the next hour. I'll pop back at the end to join in and pose some of them on your behalf. Before we start, I would highly recommend two things. Firstly, order Linwood's new book, Find You First, now via your local independent bookstore. You need to support them at this point in time. And secondly, do register for updates on Linwood's excellent website, linwoodbarclay.com. Firstly, a little bit of scene setting. Linwood is, of course, a New York Times best-selling author with over 20 novels to his credit. He spent 3 decades in newspapers before turning full-time to writing thrillers. His books have been translated into a breathtaking 30 languages, sold millions of copies, and he counts a certain Mr. Stephen King among his fans. Many of his books, as you imagine, have been optioned for film and TV, and there was a series made in France, and Linwood wrote the screenplay for the film based on his novel, Never Saw It Coming. Born in the USA, Linwood's parents moved to Canada just as he was turning 4, and he's lived there ever since. So after launching his debut, the Zach Walker series in 2004, his first standalone thriller, No Time for Goodbye, crashed onto the international thriller scene. Over here, it spent 7 straight weeks at #1 and was the UK's best-selling novel of the year. So success after success has followed. And of his newest book, one reviewer said, "It's the best book of his career. I couldn't put it down, and you won't be able to either. If you enjoy thrillers, this is the real deal. It never lets up." That reviewer was Stephen King. Praise indeed. So, Linwood, you are very welcome indeed to How to Win the Writing Game. And Sam Blake, it's over to you now to get all forensic.
Hi there, Simon. Thank you so much. I'm just bringing Linwood in now, and we can. There he is. Hi, Mr. Barclay. How are you doing there in Canada?
Good morning. Hi, how are you?
Good morning.
But as we progress, we're going to start to get some sunshine in the window, I think. Hi, how are you?
Good, very early start. I'm going to pop Simon out of the stream, and then we will be. There we go. Have a bit more space to chat. He'll be back a bit later. We're thrilled you're able to join us, and I have been completely gripped by Find You First. Let me show it to everybody there on the screen. That's the main cover, isn't it? I've got it. I'm going to bang it out into the comments soon, the buy link as well. But let me take you back just to the start of your career. Our audience is very much aspiring writers and people who basically just want to find out what it is that sells 1 million books. So that's all we need to get through. That's basically the bottom line today, is to find out how do you do it. So let's just go right back to, I suppose, starting out. And we were talking earlier before we came on about The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and how that inspired you to start writing or coming up with stories age 12. So just take us back and give us a little bit of background of how you got there.
Yeah, I'm sort of, if people are looking for advice, I'm kind of a overnight success after 40 years or so. So, but I mean, I was I was very interested in writing from a very early age, and I do credit television in many ways. I mean, when people say what inspired you, and I want to be able to say, well, it was Hemingway, it was Shakespeare, it was television, and I was a kid of the 60s, and I had my favorite shows like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Mission Impossible and Man X and all this kind of stuff. And around the age of 10, 11, I was finding that an episode a week of the show was not enough for me. I needed more adventures of these characters. So I thought, well, I'll just write them myself, what we would call fan fiction today. And so I think I was around 11 when I asked my dad to teach me how to type on this old Royal typewriter we had that
Wow.
weighed about the same as a Volkswagen. And so I started writing, by the time I was 12, I was writing 30, 40 page double-spaced type novellas, mostly
Wow.
based on The Man from U.N.C.L.E., but on others. And so it was those kind of shows that got me interested in writing, because I just had to have more adventures from of these people. And so that's what kind of got me going. And I would say probably when I was 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, I thought what I really want to do more than anything is to write for television. But, there's not a lot of demand for 17-year-old TV script writers. And so I was writing short stories, and I was writing other things. And I guess around the time I was getting to university, I was writing novels that were, with characters that I had invented instead of someone. And so probably by the time I was 20, 22, 23, 24 in there, I think I wrote at least 3 full novels, none of which were published, thankfully. I sent them out. I just sent them all. I was in my early 20s. I was rejected by some of the biggest and most prestigious publishers that are out.
That's a true accolade.
I like to joke, I could send a manuscript, put it in the mail, and send it off to Simon and Schuster, and it would be home by the time I got there. Like, that's the best they could reject. And yet I had some wonderful encouragement from some very established authors, a couple of them too, that I got to know. A Canadian writer named Margaret Lawrence, and the Ross MacDonald, the author who created the Lou Archer novels and so forth, who I incredibly had a friendship with and had dinner with one night when I was 21 years old. But it wasn't to be at that time. So when I was 22, I thought, well, where can a guy get paid money to write every day? And I got a newspaper job, and I spent 3 decades in newspapers. And the last half of it, I was a columnist. I got a gig as a columnist at the Toronto Star, where I had already worked for 12 years as an editor in lots of the departments. And so it was, I got the column in 1993. And out of the column grew, I did do actually 4 books that preceded any of my crime novels that were all in Canada, 3 sort of straight humor books and a memoir. And so that kind of got me back up and running to do what I'd always wanted to do. And around 2001, I had an idea for a novel and developed it and got an agent, and that got published by Bantam in the US.
That's
and
fantastic.
that was a character named Zach Walker. I did 4 books about him that were only published in North America and sold collectively like 28 copies. And then I shifted gears and wrote this book that was just mentioned, No Time for Goodbye, and that's the book that.
And that's the one that did it. What's really interesting listening to that, 2 things strike me. First of all, in writing fan fiction and writing so many words and creating your novels and doing English in university, you begin to understand story structure. I think even if you don't even know you're doing it, but that story structure that comes particularly from TV and the arcs that you need within each show is something that you must have been taking on board. And the other thing that strikes me is Malcolm Gladwell talks about 10,000 hours needing to be the reach. You need to do 10,000 hours of whatever it is to reach the tipping point for success. And you must have had hundreds of thousands of words under your belt by the time you wrote No Time for Goodbye.
Oh, that's true. I did. By the time I did No Time for Goodbye, I had, like I said, I'd done a couple of humor books. I wrote a memoir. I had done 4 novels about Zach. So, we already had, and of course, all the columns that I wrote.
Yeah.
So I probably had well over 1 million words under my
Lots
belt.
of practice, definitely.
Well, because you do 3 columns a week. I worked out that was 60,000 words roughly a year that I wrote for the newspaper,
which is a book in itself. Yeah.
And so so yeah, by the time I came to actually doing No Time for Goodbye, I had written probably 1.5 million words or so.
Seriously got the hang of it. I think that's what's really interesting is that's the first of, like, you're at book 20 now, all standalones. And the thing I love about No Time for Goodbye, and I'm really interested in, is that inversion of story idea, because it was based on a true thing, wasn't it? Where the little girl, there was a true story in Canada that you based it on, but you changed it around. So just talk to us a little bit about that, and then we'll get on to find you first.
People are always wondering where did the ideas come from, and as you would know, I mean, among the writing community, that's sort of our sort of hilarious cliche question is, where do you get your ideas? But I understand that question. I mean, it's easier for us to laugh, but I understand it because we could sit here and think, where did Lennon and McCartney get all those songs? Like, where did those come from?
Yeah.
Like, I'm as baffled by that as anybody would be about where we get our ideas to write book. And so sometimes ideas just come out of thin air. They're just there. And sometimes they're inspired by something. And sometimes an idea that inspires you is not the idea you end up with, but it triggers an idea. So No Time for Goodbye was a thriller about a 14-year-old girl who wakes up one morning and her whole family is gone. Like, her mother's gone, her brother, her dad, they're all gone. And they just appeared in the night. And what actually inspired that was a story in the Toronto area of a 14-year-old girl who had been abducted from her house in the night. And when her parents woke up in the morning, she was gone.
She was gone, yeah.
And I was just thinking about that. And I thought, what if you turned that upside down?
That's the really interesting bit to me, is the fact that you take the idea and then you flip it.
And so that became a novel not about what had happened, but what had happened had just triggered a thought. And then I thought, how do you take that idea and twist it into something else? And so that's where that book came from. And a lot of times stories can be like that. You get an idea or something strikes you. I mean, I did a book. I've seen somebody somewhere along the side there's some questions from people, and I saw an elevator pitch, which is before Find You First.
I'm just going to bang this. So I'm just going to interrupt and bang No Time for Goodbye into the stream so people can see the cover. A link there to buy. Oh, look!
Proof of Loving Man from Uncle. This is one of my sons.
On the mug. There we go. Let me get rid of that. And then we'll go on to elevator pitch.
So we take elevator pitch as an example. Toronto is the downtown by the waterfront of Toronto, where I live. In the last 10 years now, it looks more like Hong Kong. There are just literally dozens of massively tall condo towers. And there was a story on the news locally one day that the city did not have enough elevator inspectors to keep up with this rate of construction. There had not been any problems, but it was just simply, we just need more people. And I heard that, and just hearing that, I instantly had this, what if you had a guy who was a sort of a very different kind of serial killer who was taking people out of the picture by sabotaging elevators across Manhattan? Just, that's what he does. So there had been no news story about someone doing that. There had been no news story about an elevator accident. But I heard that item on the news, and the idea was just there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what sometimes those who are writers and those who are not, writers take an innocent situation and think about how horribly wrong that it could go.
Yes.
And so that was one of those circumstances.
Oh, it's fascinating. I find it fascinating. It's that it's just the way your mind works, and you're so right about that Lennon McCartney thing, because everybody asks about where these ideas come from, and it's a bit unpredictable, isn't it? So, Find You First is the current book about tech millionaire, various people with lots of money and all sorts of awful things that happen. Where did that idea come from?
Well, before I tell you the idea, I guess I should tell you just briefly what it's about. And it's about a very wealthy tech guy who's in his 40s, has no wife, he doesn't have family, he's just on his own. And he learns that, the one thing money can't buy is time. And he has learned that he has a terminal illness. And the doctor says, well, it's just as well you never had kids, because this is a disease that passes on to about 50% of offspring. And what our character Miles knows, and the doctor does not, is that years ago he was a sperm donor. So there could be any number of kids out there, grown adults, who might come down with this. Plus, he has all this millions of dollars. Like, what's he going to do with it? So after a lot of soul searching, he thinks, I'm going to find these kids who I'm the father of. And first I'll let them know that they might want to get themselves checked. They might have this condition. And also, this is who I'm going to leave my money to. And as he embarks on the search, all of these potential heirs start vanishing one by one. They just start, they're not just getting killed, like they just vanish.
Yeah.
And every trace of them does. And that's our jumping off point. And the first of these, potential heirs that he does find before anyone gets to heirs are Chloe, who's an aspiring documentarian. And so Chloe and Miles are trying to figure out what the hell's going on with all these others disappearing. And the sort of slight inspiration for this was a piece, I think, a couple of years ago in the New York Times magazine. It was kind of a photo essay of someone who was going across the country taking pictures of half siblings who'd all come from the same sperm donor. And it was kind of an interesting sort of celebration, an interesting exploration of that idea. And like I mentioned before, as a thriller writer, I looked at that and thought, how could that? And so that was the jumping off point. And as is often the case with writing a thriller, I had the idea, I had the hook, which is they're all disappearing, but I had no idea why.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when I wrote No Time for Goodbye, when I had the initial idea for No Time for Goodbye, and this girl wakes up and the family's gone. And I talked to my agent that morning, because my literary agent, she said, that is a great pitch for, opening for a thriller, a great hook. And because she's very good with plot and so forth, and we talked these things out, she said, what happened to the family? And I said, I have no idea. And she said, well, you'll figure that out. And we did. And so Find You First is a book like that. I mean, I had my setup, I had my hook.
Yeah.
These were all vanishing, but I didn't know why. I had one idea of why I thought it was, but the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't make it work the way I wanted it to. And so then I brought in basically an entire parallel story into the novel, and that was my solution.
It's fascinating. That brings me on to structure, but I love, we open with Todd, and Chloe has found, I find it really fascinating how you draw in sort of modern day influences and things that resonate with people. So there's a DNA database that you mentioned. Chloe's discovered she's using one of these, forgotten the name of them, all of them now, the DNA database where you can go and find your relatives or whatever they're called. And she hooks up with Todd, doesn't she? So this is where the book starts. And that's fascinating because that's starting to come through, and people finding relatives, and there are sort of stories that are coming through the news. And there's lots of other things. There's sort of an Epstein type thread, isn't there, as well? And so you're drawing on a lot of things that really resonate with people, I think, which makes the story feel really real. And the other thing that you do in all your books is really create amazing characters. So Chloe, just like you say, she's a documentarian. She works in a diner. She's got this park racer car, and she's just so real. I mean, did you spend a long time researching her and getting into her, or did she just arrive in your head?
She just came. She just showed up at the door, and there she was. And
she's so strong.
And I just kind of had an instant sense of Chloe, that she was a very strong-willed, independent-minded young woman with a talent for photography and interviewing and so forth. And she was just there all at once. And her sort of smart alecky nature, and she becomes a great kind of foil for Miles too. Miles is this big wealthy tech guy who thinks he's just, such a bright guy. And she just kind of cuts him off at the knees all the time. Like, you think you know everything, but do you really know this? And so, but I'd love to tell you that I spent a lot of time researching her and thinking about her for days, but I didn't. She was just there.
I think that's the gift, though, as a writer, that happens sometimes, doesn't it? The characters literally just survive. Joseph O'Connor, I keep quoting this, but Joseph O'Connor has this, an Irish writer, has this theory that the characters sort of float around our heads as writers in some sort of ether, and they're waiting to connect with the writers who are going to tell their story. And when they arrive, then quite often they arrive fully formed, and that's what it sounds like.
I feel that way kind of about this whole sort of the story in its essence. Like
Yeah.
the very idea for the story, like a girl wakes up, nobody's home, or this guy's trying to. I always feel like those are the ideas that are just sort of floating out there, and they're just
They're looking to land on the right person.
10 out of these little radar things on our head, and we're just waiting to go by. And I feel if I one of them a year, I'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other ones just floated right past just now, and I thought, I wish I'd grabbed that one.
That's exactly it. And the structure of this is quite complicated because you've got the parallel stories. You've got 9 children that Miles needs to find, who are all disappearing, and then you've got your parallel story as well. And so you've got quite a lot of characters going on. You've got a fantastic character. I love Charisse as well. I have to say, Miles's driver. She's just awesome. I can feel these people. They make either great TV or another book series characters. I'd love to know more about them. So you've got a fantastic set of characters, but it's complicated. There's lots of people. There's lots of story, and it's really woven in tightly. So did you structure that or did you just sit down and write it out? I mean, how did you tackle it?
Sat down and wrote it out. I mean, I not just in this book, but in a lot of my other ones, I find that if you have, say, you've got several storylines going, you've got 4 sort of storylines. You've got A, B, C, and D, and you kind of rotate them. You do your A story, and then end that chapter on a bit of a cliffhanger. But then you go to your B story, and you're thinking, as a reader, you think, well, I want to get back to the A story because there's something big happened. But now we're in the B story, and the B story ends with a kind of a cliffhanger. And you're like, now I got 2 I got to get back to. But then we go to the C story, and you're kind of rotating them around so that you're always falling into another story, but racing through it to get back to the other thread. And so it's kind of like this revolving door of stuff going on. And so I think that helps propel the story.
Yeah.
In my earlier novels, I tended to tell the entire book from a first-person point of view. So we were only ever with the main character, and the story is very kind of linear. But when you start having more than one point of view, you can kind of dip in here and come back over here. And I think that when, at least for me, that you can build suspense too. I think if you jump to a storyline that our main character is unaware of, but you know about it as the writer, and as the reader, you know about it, and so you're thinking, I know some shit that the main character doesn't know, and I wish there was a way I could tell him because he's going to be in a whole lot of trouble. But he doesn't know about it, but you do. And I think that's kind of where the suspense goes off. I think Hitchcock talked about this one time. He said, if you're all sitting around, if the characters are all sitting around and a bomb goes off, that's shocking. But if the characters are all sitting around and there's a bag that has a bomb in it and you know it, and you're waiting for it to go off or waiting for them to know that it's going to go off, that's what builds the suspense.
Absolutely. I think that's like pure gold for people watching, to understand that structure. And although, you don't plot it out, all of those years of writing fan fiction and understanding story structure, what goes into it, so it becomes instinctive, I think.
Yeah, and I think for me, like I say, because TV was such an immense influence on me, I always feel that chapter breaks are commercial breaks. Okay. Like whenever you watch a show as a kid, you came up to a certain point, and then all of a sudden our hero fell down a well or something, and then we went to a commercial. And so it's like, I got to go to the bathroom and get a sandwich, and I'll be right back. And so you'd come back and think, what happened? So I always feel like chapter breaks are those commercial breaks. You end in such a way that you feel you have to continue. Because I'll sometimes read other authors, and they'll give me a very dramatic turning point, and it comes in the middle of a chapter. And I think, don't do it there. Do it at the end. Because I think there's something kind of, I'm trying to find an example. I just call it, okay, so this is called a book. And so I think that what you see over here is a kind of graphic suspense space or something. Like when you see that tells you we're taking a break because something big has happened or something big's about to happen. Or we've just had and so and then there's this big chunk of white space that hammers that point home to you. And that white space is the commercial break. And so that's the way I think about trying, not always successful, but trying to end chapters in such a way that you think, oh, I gotta keep on going.
Yeah, I'm loving this. I always say to people that I learn something every single time I speak to an author, and that way of looking at chapters is honestly genius. It's great. That's exactly what it is, isn't it? It's that you have to, as an author, you have to. It would be lovely if we thought that people just read our books right the way through, but people do have to sleep occasionally. But if we think about it in terms of being a commercial break, then you want to go back. So I think that's that is literally the way this book works, because you can't put it down. You need to know what's going to happen next because of that suspension, that whole, the fact that bits and you want to know what's happening and how's it going to play out and what's going to happen. And it's really cleverly, it's the highest octane book I've read in a long time, and the ending is just insanely brilliant. So you guys have to make sure you buy your copy. I'm going to pop it in the screen now. I'm going to put it up there so you can see it there, just in case. And so it keeps up the momentum all the way through, and I can see completely from what you're saying that structure is what is propelling it.
And it's sort of a cliche, but I think that especially once you kind of hit to a midpoint of a book, that the book is this big boulder rolling down a hill, and it's just going to go faster and faster as it heads down that hill. And I do think this book worked that way, and it does have a kind of over the top, outrageous kind of action towards the end, which I couldn't wait to get to.
Crazy, but it's fun. It's so good. It really is, yeah. And it explains something. It's foreshadowed brilliantly because something happens right at the beginning and you're thinking, how mad is this? And then it comes into play all the way through. So yeah, I'm not going to give them any spoilers. They have to read it to find out what it's all about. No, really, really excellent. So we've got that's character, sometimes they arrive, and the structure. You did I think a masterclass once. I'll just pop out the cover so I can see you properly. There we go. You did a masterclass once where you were speaking about how important the first page was in a book. Is the first page that you write the first page that we read, or does it sometimes take a while to play around and move stuff about?
That varies. Sometimes I'll write something and then I decide to tack a prologue onto the beginning. But by this point, generally, the first page that I do ends up staying that way. But I do say, a lot of times people will ask, after a writing seminar, people are asking about how to get published, and my experience, for what it's worth, is, if you're looking for an agent, and I think trying to find a literary agent is a really good way to go if you can get one and contrary to what you might think, literary agents may get 20, 30 submissions a day, but a lot of them will look at all of them. Like, they'll have a quick look. It sometimes take long. If you're a literary agent and the first email of the day is, I've written a collection of poetry about camels, you might think, delete. Don't read it anymore. Maybe one poem about a camel would be great, but I don't need the whole book of them. So you can go through these things and think, yeah, but then you might call up something and it looks kind of interesting, but you've still got 30 other emails to get to. So you think, well, I'm going to have a look at this. I'll look at the page. I'll look at the first page. And I always feel like you'll live or die based on the first page, because a first page will give an agent or a reader a sense of tone and voice and whether you can write. You can't get the story out in page one. You can't get all that. You can't get a sense of what it's about, but you can get a sense of how this person writes. And which is why, the most brilliant American writer no longer with us, Elmore Leonard, there's a reason why he said, never start with weather.
Yeah, absolutely.
The sun was shining and I was like, I'm already like I'm out. So I think you really have to find a way to get a reader's attention really quickly, especially now, more than ever, I feel, because I feel like, I'm binge watching this show and that show, and we're trying to get through the pandemic, watching, every night, watch tonight. And we can consume television now the way we would consume a book.
Yeah.
Chapter after chapter. We don't have to wait a week like I did when I was a kid. So I think novelists, that's our competition.
Yeah.
We're going to grab hold of you long enough so that you won't watch, all of The Crown or The Queen's Gambit. Like, what can we do to get your attention so we don't have a lot of time to grab you. So that's why I think that you really have to engage the reader in a hurry. And I think agents are looking for that. It was funny when I was writing my first of my 4 sort of comic thrillers about Zach Walker. I called up an agent and I said I wanted to send her something, and she said, well, "What is it?" I said, "It's a comic thriller," and she said, "Oh." She said, "Those are very hard to do. Very few people do them well. Very few comic thrillers are bestsellers. But," she said, "if you want to send me the first chapter, you can." So I emailed her the first chapter. And the next day she emailed me back and she said, "Email me chapter 2.
Ooh, good sign.
So she gave that first chapter enough time to just sort of look, okay, and it worked. But hammering the point home, I think that you don't have much time to get people's attention.
No, you're dead right, and I think that's again gold dust advice. And in Find You First, it's Todd we meet first, and and it's really interesting because actually all your characters have lives, complete lives of their own, as well as being part of the book. So Todd is busy doing his a few nefarious things that involve mobile phones and conning people out of money as well. So when we arrive into his trailer, we find a whole lot about his life. We get a real sense of your writing, and we're completely hooked because we want to know what's going on. We want to know what's going on in his life, and we want to know what's going on and how it all pans out. So I think that's absolutely gold dust advice, and massively well achieved in this, because it does literally hook you straight in.
And something about that first chapter. Now, the first chapter of Find You First takes place 2 weeks later into the story. So it's a prologue, and then after this little story about Todd, we go back to whatever it is, a month earlier, 2 weeks, I forget. I wrote it so long ago.
Yeah, Miles. I know that's the problem, isn't it? You're writing the next one now.
The thing is, if I were to tell this story completely in a linear way, then I would start off where chapter 1 starts. Now, we would go a very long time before we had a major event, a serious crime. And so I think there has to be a way to get your attention, as we were just saying, right away. So I bring one of those crimes that's in the future, and I give it to you in chapter right in the beginning. Here's a big thing that happened, and then we're going to find out later what led to that moment.
Exactly.
And something I don't know if you know, this American TV producer, TV creator, genius guy, J.J. Abrams, who's now doing Star Wars movies and all that kind of stuff. And I got on to J.J. Abrams watching stuff of his way back when he was doing the show called Alias. And if you look at Alias, or if you look at the third Mission Impossible movie, which J.J. Abrams did, and so forth, you see a trick that he does all the time, which is he starts with a hugely dramatic moment, very tense, very suspenseful, and it's like it hits you right in the face right from the beginning, and then it's like, holy mackerel, and then it ends, and then we go to 2 days earlier, 3 days earlier, whatever it was, and you think, okay, we know that something huge is coming because we've had a teaser of it, and so now we're willing to just sit down here for a little while and be patient.
And find out, because that's the thing, you need to read, because you need to find out how this thing happened and why it happened, and it literally propels you through. Now, I think it's fascinating to hear that how much. I mean, we know we can learn lots in screenwriting and lots, but it's fascinating to hear how you approach the story, because I think we learn so much just from listening to different people's ways in, and all the information you've gleaned through your writing career, and obviously watching lots of TV and drawing on those threads, is what makes a book work and what makes a book so successful. What I find fascinating as well is the fact you're on book 20 and they're 20 standalones, and it's a new idea and fresh characters every time. Does it take you a long time? I think you write your first drafts quite quickly, so I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, but does it take you a long time to think about the idea and get that bit working?
Yeah, in fact, they're kind of a mix. They're mostly standalones. The first 4 novels were part of a series about Zach Walker, so I had those 4. And then I stopped. Then I started doing standalones, and then I did, I don't know, about 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I did a trilogy of sort of 3 linked novels. I wouldn't call it a series. It was kind of like one really huge standalone of 3: Broken Promise, Far from Trewin, and 23. And then I did do one more book with those characters in Parting Shot. You take those aside, and you're quite right. I've done standalones, and there's advantage and disadvantage to both. I mean, if you're writing a series, I think sort of half your work's done for you. You have your character, got your setting, you've got all this stuff. You think, just what will I do with them this time? And yet with a standalone, you're starting from scratch because you've got everything to create. But the thing is, with a standalone, you can do anything you want with these people.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to save any of them for another book.
Yeah,
Where
that's true.
Limited in a series. I mean, if you're reading one of the new James Bonds, whether it's way back when Ian Fleming's doing, or whether it's Anthony Horowitz's take on him, which are very, very good, he'll be okay.
Yeah.
James Bond, that'll be tense, it'll be interesting. But like when you read a Lee Child's Jack Reacher, which are great books, I'm always much more worried for the people Reacher meets.
Oh, definitely.
Than Reacher himself.
Yeah.
Reacher will be fine, but all these other people are going to have the shit beat out of them.
Yeah.
So, but in a standalone, you don't know for sure. I mean, I did a couple years ago called A Noise Downstairs. I think it was a standalone, and it allowed me to do something that you often can't do, which I won't get into. But I mean, it's you can do anything you want to these people.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And so does that process of sort of finding the story and thinking about it, do you spend a long time thinking about how the story is going to evolve, or do you literally start off with that spark of idea and start writing and see where it's going to take you?
No, that's the one time where I kind of have to slow down or stop. I mean, I have to before I started writing Find You First, I knew that all these people were vanishing, but I didn't know why. So I had to know that before I started. I really needed to know that. So, they talk about, that sort of cliched phrase of writers, are you a plotter or a pantser? Do you plot or go by the seat of your pants? I'm sort of in the middle.
Between.
I know the big picture. I know who did what. I know who the bad guys are. I know all that stuff. I know where I want to end up. I know all those things. But I don't know how I'll quite get there. It's like, if you're going to get in the car, I'm going to start driving from New York and I'm going to San Francisco. Well, I know I'm starting here and I'm going to go to there. But there's 100 different routes I could take to get there.
Yeah.
As I start off on this journey, I can take sort of detours and here and there and think, oh, I could do this, I could do that. So the opportunities that exist in the book, I don't realize until I get to them that I can do this now. But I do know where I'm going.
Where your headphone.
It's kind of I learned that lesson really early, because when I was writing that first Zach Walker book, and I had an agent, and I had 2/3 of the book done, and my agent read the first 2/3, and she said, and because I say she's really good at working out plots and stuff, and she said, "Who did it? Like, who's the killer?" And I said, "Well, it's either," and she said, "Stop." She said, "If you don't know, stop. And before you read another chapter, figure out the last third of this book." And I did. And it was a really good lesson, because then I figured it all out. And and then all the tumblers fell into place.
Yeah.
I want to know who did it, because when I'm jumping from one character's head to another as they speak, if this character is lying, I want to know that, because when I jump into their head, I need to know their motivation. I need to know that they're lying, that they're spinning a tale. And so I need to know that. But, like for every writer that there's a different approach.
Oh, I know, but I think that's fascinating, because that's exciting thing, isn't it? That the different approaches, but also for you as a writer, you're keeping it exciting if you're writing, if you're finding your way through it. Because if you know, I mean, a lot of people say, well, if you overplot, then there's no joy in writing the book. And I think that's an ideal, when you've got the confidence to do that, that's an ideal balance.
I mean, I've done Ian Rankin's a friend. I've done lots of events with Ian over the years, and Ian talks about he doesn't plan it all out. He starts working. He said he writes the book to find out what happened.
Yeah.
Which I think is great and exciting, but I don't work that way. I figure I wouldn't start building a house without blueprints. Yeah. I wouldn't build a house without building a solid foundation before the walls go up. And so I have to go at it a different way.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I'd be exactly the same there. So, and then but when you start writing that first draft, you write it quite fast, don't you? How long does it take you to write the first draft?
First draft is usually 2.5 to 3 months. I try to write about 2,000 words a day. That's 10,000 words in a week. And so in 2.5 months, you've got a first draft, maybe 3 months. So that's generally how I work. And it's nice. I like to be able to choose a time to write when I know I won't have any interruptions. Like if I knew I were going on a book tour, if any of those ever happen again.
Yeah.
But if I thought, well, it's the 1st of September and I've got a book tour in October, I would not want to start writing a book in September, because I'd like to be able to just work right
Have
through
the
that.
flow right the way through.
And I think a lot of this comes from, as I said, I spent 3 decades in newspapers. So writing is work. You know, you don't all this writer's block crap, this sort of like, do you get plumber's block?
I know. I was just going to say plumber's block.
We're writers are just so precious that we have a condition to describe just being too lazy to get our work done. And so as you work in newspapers and you say, oh, the muse has struck me.
You can't do that, can you? You've got a deadline.
Work. So writing's a job. So I want to get to work.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. 2,000 words a day. And that's, keeping going and keeping moving through it. And then when you finish that very first draft, you rewrite a good bit. And I read somewhere that you were saying that one book took longer to fix than it did to write the first draft.
No Time for Goodbye was like lightning in a bottle. I mean, that first draft was not very different from the final one. And books like The Accident and Tap on the Window, I went through just massive rewrites on those books. They just didn't have it right the first time. But if I finish a first draft in 2.5 months, I'll put it aside for a week, and then I'll go back and go through it, and might take another week on it, and then I'll give it to my editors. Yeah. And because I figure there's no sense killing myself doing 100 other things to this until I find out whether they think everything's wrong anyway. So I'm just I must get it to them and see what they think. So, but I always find that I'm in that period right now where you've delivered a book. I've delivered next year's book, and it's with and it's like waiting for tests to come back from the doctor. Am I going to be okay?
Yeah, is it going to work?
It's all over. So that's always a bit of a stressful time waiting for that.
Oh yeah, exciting too though. It's lovely. I think that break then is like you say, you put it away for a week before you go back to it, and that's really valuable too, because you need new eyes, don't you? Because you get so absorbed in the story, especially a complicated one like Find Your First.
I find that it's interesting. I find that you get so close to it, you not only can't see what's not working, you don't even see what is working. Because you might finish it, people read, wow, I love the part about, you think, oh, okay, I guess that was all right. But you get so close to it. I have some books that are favorites that I've done, and some, and someone will say, oh, my absolute favorite book is such and such a book, which might be one I like the least. And it seems rude to argue and say, no, I'm sorry, you're wrong. That's a piece of shit. It's just awful. And so I just say, okay, thanks, that's great.
That's good. That's good. And move on to the next one. So obviously you're working ahead. You've got the next idea delivered. Have you an idea for the book, the next two? Yeah. Have you the next one?
I need to start writing a book probably by the end of September, October. I have no idea what it would be at all, but that's okay, because something will always come. But so the book that would be out, say, a year from now, I have delivered that manuscript. But I know it'll come back to me, and I'll have work to do on that. Yeah. And I wrote a book, God, it must be like 2-3 years ago now. I wrote another novel that was a little bit different than what I used to do.
This is your Cars book, isn't it? This is just the Spare book. I'm really interested in the Spare book. Go on.
A Michael Crichton kind of a thriller, I call it, think Jurassic Park, but instead of dinosaurs, it's self-driving cars.
Oh, it sounds brilliant. Yeah.
Test community where every car on the road is a self-driving car, and then a virus gets introduced into the system, and all the cars become homicidal. It's great fun. Lots of people.
You love it. Yeah.
So I wrote this. Everybody likes it, but they think it's not really what you usually do. How are we going to market this? What are they, like? And so, but we think we're going to bring it out before the end of the year. Maybe just as an ebook, or maybe I don't know. But I think that'll be out. I do think it'll be out before the end of this year.
Excellent. That's good to hear, because I remember when you were in Dublin last time, I think you were talking about the Spare book, and I was really interested in it was interesting to see where it would go, and maybe do it under a different name or whatever.
It's kind of like 1,000 Christines, all at once.
Brilliant, brilliant. No, it's great. It sounds fantastic, and really interesting. And it's really interesting to go off in a different direction too. I mean, do you feel? I mean, thrillers are your thing now, but did that stretch you? Was the idea just arrived and you planned on going that way?
I have another idea for a sort of, I don't know if it's sci-fi or whatever, but I have another idea that I've had in the back of my head for literally years that I maybe eventually will do one day. But it's a bit of a departure from what people expect to read from me.
Yeah.
So it's figuring out when's the right time, or that kind
What
of
to
thing.
do with it? Yeah. Perhaps you just need another name, and then you can just let them out.
That
All these slightly sci-fi ones.
that might,
A whole new readership
that might be the answer.
to bring them in now. Goodness me, this is absolutely fascinating. We have had a host of questions. So I think this might be a good time to bring Mr. Trewin in, who hopefully will have been keeping an eye on the questions. I'm going to pop him, and I'm going to pop in the book again. Here he comes. Just give us a couple of seconds, then we can go through them because I can see loads. There's Simon. I'm just going to bring the book in, Simon, so we've got a better layout. That's better, isn't it?
Or go.
Have we got? Oh, we need to unmute you. Hang on a minute. You got. I'm just going to unmute you. Try that now.
No.
Now we can hear you.
Yeah, I think you've been keeping an eye on them as well. But I think, firstly, people don't want the hour ever to end. But I know you've got
fascinating.
To do something pretty quickly. I've got a question before we go to these fantastic ones I've got here. You mentioned about the pandemic, and you mentioned about how we've got to, as writers, you've got to grab readers' attention. Do you think the whole notion of what a contemporary novel or contemporary thriller is going to be in the future is going to be changed by what we've all lived through?
I don't know. I mean, did World War II change what thrillers are? This is a major event for sure. But people keep asking, are we going to write a thriller about a pandemic? And I think, well, there's probably only 700 other authors who have debated a novel about the pandemic. And how much will we necessarily, at least right away, want to read about through it? It's like, oh, please, I've had enough. There's already somebody's made some movie that went straight to Netflix that's about a pandemic. I can't imagine wanting to watch this, although I did watch Contagion.
Oh gosh, I watched that early on. Bad idea.
But I think everyone should have been forced to watch, actually. But anyway.
Oh, it's terrifying.
I think that, so I don't plan to write it, but I do think, like the novel that I've just delivered, which I have set in the year that it comes out in 2022, there are a couple of references to it. Because we can't pretend it didn't happen. Like there's a reference to the guy's still got some sanitizer in his truck or some latex gloves that he used when he would go buy gas. And so it's like, yeah, that happened. And I'm hopeful that by the time the book would come out in over a year, that we'll kind of mostly move past this. Either that or we're all going to set our books from here on in 2019. But then I think great pandemic thriller was written by Mr. King in around 1979. It was called The Stand. We can't top. So what would be the point? I think for me anyway, it's going to, like, if you're writing a novel and a couple of people meet in a bar, are they going to meet in a bar? Are they going to sit close together? Are they going to shake hands? Will our habits change moving forward so we don't do these things? I think that remains to be seen. So I guess all these people who write historical novels, they don't have to worry about this.
No, that's for sure.
When you, a lot of people we've spoken to talk about how if you want to be a writer, you've got to be a reader first and foremost. And I think you've talked a lot about reading and writing when you were growing up. Do you read other authors while you're writing, or do you kind of shut off your influences?
I hear that from some people that that when they're writing they can't read. I think, well, can you not walk and chew gum? It's if I read a book a year, and between writing it and editing it and all that stuff, that takes up like 5-6 months out of the year. I think so. If I chose not to read stuff at that time, there wouldn't be a lot. I wouldn't get a lot of reading done. So it's not an issue for me. Like I'll read whatever I want when I'm working. It's not. It's totally separate.
And do you read widely in lots of genres, like anyone else?
Yeah, I do read a lot of crime fiction. I don't know if I read a lot of thrillers like the kind of thing I write. but I'm kind of all over the place to some degree. I mean, I just read Barack Obama's book a few weeks ago. Read two novels that are this massive novel called Paradise Falls that was written back in the 60s that I've been waiting to read forever, and I had time in January. And occasionally I read a biography or something. But I tend to read when it comes to crime fiction and so forth. I read people who I think are way better than I am. And I just look and think, wow, how could I get to be this good? You know, like you pick up James Lee Burke and you think, how does he do this? You know, how does he write one of these every? It's just astonishing piece of work. So, but I do kind of read, you know, all sorts of different things.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Somebody's saying here that they read Elevator Pitch, and it was so good they didn't know what to go to next. They couldn't find anything after it. She said only problem was it was too hard to find a book that satisfied after that, and her daughter was the same. So yeah, I think you're meeting the mark for sure. You'll love Find Your First too as well. So, but I'm reading this thinking the same thing. Reading people who are the experts, definitely.
Well, you know, I'll read, like I said, read James C. Burke or whatever, and I'll read certain people, and I think, boy, am I ever glad we don't all have to be this good to get published. Some of us just hand in any old thing to get published. Others are just really, you know, cranking out beautifully. And you know, and I'm looking forward to. I just reread. Speaking of, you know, I was talking about the car book. I reread Stephen King's Christine, which I read, I think in 1984. I hadn't read it since, and I just thought I'm going to pick this up again. And so I've done that. I've gone back to a few things that I'd read a long time ago through the pandemic that I just thought I'm going to go back to this and see what I think of it now. And it was still great.
Have you? Do you ever reread any of your earlier books?
Oh God, no. No, I don't. No, I never reread any of my own books. I just, it would be just too painful. It'd be like looking at baby pictures or something, or you know, those high school yearbook photos. I just, and the other thing is, of course, you read it, you think, wow, I can totally see where this is going. So no, I do not read my own books ever.
That's fascinating. I find that's the thing, isn't it? When you go back over it, that's the thing that always worries me when you're reading your own book. After that first or second draft stage, is that you know what happens at the end, and it's very hard to tell whether or not you've hidden it well enough. Do you have problems with that, or you're saying that you're thinking in terms of the motivation of the characters every time you write a chapter, and are they lying or what are they doing? Do you find it hard to hide the ending, or is that something that just now at this stage of experience gets hidden nicely along the way?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow.
So you know when you know what the end is and you're working towards it. When you're reading back over, I always find it difficult when you're reading back over it because you know what the end is. You can't tell whether you've hidden it well enough.
Well, that's a good question. Whether you've, you know, because you want to sort of play fair with the reader so that if they were really paying attention, they might see what was coming. But it's this sort of sleight of hand thing, you know, like a card trick. It's all happening in front of you, but you didn't see it. So I do like to try to do that. And sometimes it would be a really good editor when they go through it, will say, I think this line or this part here gives too much away. That find a way to just sort of just hide this. You can leave it there, but we just sort of tuck it under something or whatever. And so sometimes that can happen. Or else you will, like the book that I have just finished that I've handed in, I'm worried that this one particular character, maybe it's too obvious. And I gave it to a friend to read, and he didn't see it coming. But I may have an editor who will. And so when I get back to it, I'll have to find a way to shade that character, do something so that it's not quite so obvious.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that sleight of hand. I think you've really nailed it there in terms of how you move through the story. It literally is sleight of hand to try and keep the twists moving.
Something that's happening here is really important and is the key to the whole thing, but we're going to give you a little dazzling bright object over here and you won't notice it, you know, but it was there.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Oh, we've lost Simon again. Simon, you're on mute. I don't know what's happened to your sound. Just see if you can press your buttons there. No, we lost you. Might need to pop out and come back in again. No, you've gone. It's all right. Don't worry. If you want to, do you want to pop out? Just let's try again. Nope, lost you. Do you want to come back out, go out and come back in again? The joys of technology. There we go. He'll be back in a second. Yeah, I think that's the thing, is it's that shiny object, and it's finding the shiny object to distract the reader. And that's the thing that happens in Find You First, is because these things are woven in so tightly, that we're always looking over here, and yet there's stuff happening over here.
And sometimes I will do is I will weave in what looks like a subtle clue, and it's just unsubtle enough that a reader will go, "Oh, I know what's going on here. That's who did it." But it's a red herring. Like it's but it's not. But it's been introduced in a subtle way so that you'll think that you know something, but you don't.
But you don't, because you're taken. And that's the thing, because I mean, I would say you're the absolute king of twists, because all of your books have twists. Do you know the twists before you start? I mean, you were talking about knowing the end and finding your way through.
Big twists I do, and sometimes I think too, some twists are not necessarily big twists, but they are, they're in the way you present them. And sometimes, like I talked earlier about ending on like chapters like commercial. If you present something that's just a little bit of a twist at the end of a chapter, because it's the end of a chapter, it feels like a bigger twist.
Yeah.
And it may not be that big, but it's just enough of one. And so, but anytime there's any kind of a twist, it has to be at the end of the chapter. And some of them are little, and some of them are big. Like there's one, I think, huge one in Find You First, and that so far everyone I've talked to, not anyone has seen coming. And so those are the big ones, and you kind of, as a writer, you know you're going to do it, you know it's coming, and you kind of can't wait to get to it.
Get there. Oh, it's so exciting. Such a good book. Simon, have we got you back again?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I really enjoyed that, hearing that insecurity from you about the fact that you've given your book in and you're waiting to see what your editor thinks about it. Does it always feel like that with every book?
Does which? The last part I didn't hear.
Yeah, your sound's a bit strange. She was just saying that do you have that insecurity when you hand in a book every time, that you have that nervousness to know what's going to happen?
Oh yeah, I mean, 20 books in, I still feel like, oh God, I hope I haven't completely screwed it up this time. And I find that, so I do feel a little anxious with every book still. And every book I have done has gotten better with working with a really good editor. And so I don't always agree with everything that they suggest, but a lot of times they see things that really can improve a book. But it is kind of that waiting period can be difficult. And a lot of times, I'll make a kind of fundamental error in a book, and I think, okay, I'm going to learn from that one. I won't make that mistake again, and I don't. And then in the next book, I make a whole new one.
Because it's a learning process, isn't it, all the way through?
It's always a learning process. I don't think that I think maybe that's why a lot of us keep writing book after book, is we're still trying to write that absolutely perfect book, and it's just so elusive, to write that one that's just perfect from beginning to end, and it hasn't happened yet.
Well, I think Find You First is awesome, and is very close to being a perfect book. It's really, it's brilliant. I'm hoping all the guys are going to be buying it. We might have lost Simon now because of the sound situation. But thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to bump this. I'm just going to take the cover away. We've got it there, but I can see you a little bit better. All the way from Canada. And you're doing another event later this morning, have you? Because actually it's 7 a.m. just to let everybody know that this is dedication to the cause now.
I got another one in an hour, so I can go down now and finish breakfast.
Absolutely.
And if you were to look at this screen an hour ago, it would have been a lot darker, but we now have some light coming into
sunlight. So your day has started. Well, thank you.
Glary from this artificial light.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. Listen, thank you so much for joining us and starting off your day with us. It has been fascinating, with some amazing nuggets of wisdom in there. I mean, just brilliant. So I'm hoping that we've sent the links out into the comments. People can buy the book. It'll be up on YouTube as well. And obviously we'll be sharing it. So we wish, the other thing, you probably already know this, but it's number 2 in the Irish fiction chart, original fiction chart.
Ireland, thank you so much.
Which is pretty impressive. Very good.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate
it's awesome. So on that note, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Linwood Barclay. I hope to see you very soon, hopefully in Dublin again soon.
Hope so.
And enjoy your breakfast.
Very much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.